Hi again then guys, and welcome to yet another specific car review from the most recent batch of cars to come to the game in 1.19, and we're taking a step back from the extreme performance of Group C or the great Group 4 ability of something like a Megane or even the off-road potential of an Evo, and going much lower down the food chain to a classic car, an icon for sure of the classic world, one of the most iconic city cars you could say ever made, probably at least up there with the Mini Cooper, maybe even more iconic possibly. And that car is, of course, in particular the Fiat 500F from way back in 1968, and I like the fact that at least so far we don't have an overabundance of Fiat 500s in the game, because although when we think of needless duplicates our minds often go to stuff like the Skylines, the S2000s, the RX-7s, the MX-5s, and that's true for sure, we have an entire series for that on Gran Turismo 6 here on the channel. But with the Fiat 500, it's one of those that you don't think of necessarily first, and yet we do have more than enough of them. You do not need as many as we had on Gran Turismo 6. It was something like 6 or 7 different variations, and the only real differences were the visual ones, rather than any significant difference in performance. Now for this particular car, of course it gets the fully detailed, updated treatment. There was already a premium version in Gran Turismo 6, you don't have the visual tuning options anymore of course, and I would say that this car, and in fact it's not a matter of opinion, it's a fact, this car has been significantly neutered by the tuning methods of Gran Turismo Sport, and it's unfortunate when that happens because there are a few cars in particular which really do not benefit from the new tuning. There are a couple of cars which do, something like the Nismo GTR Le Mans car for instance. You couldn't upgrade that at all on GT6, whereas now you can. Other ones though, like this car, the Samba bus, I personally feel that they will probably add the classic Beetle at some point. That car no doubt will suffer from the same issue, and that issue is that because the upgrades in particular, not just the tuning but the upgrade parts themselves, have been so pared back compared to the previous titles in the franchise, or at least most of them, you just can't get these cars to unlock the same kind of potential. This car, for instance, on Gran Turismo 6 had around 150 or so horsepower when fully tuned. I believe it might have been even higher than that. Likewise with the Samba bus, you could get it up around 200 horsepower, whereas now that's just not an option. And this is an N100 car. It's certainly a great rival for the Samba bus, they're both very slow. This one has easily the advantage through corners, but of course it's relative. When a car is this slow, it's kind of automatically going to be pretty nimble. But funnily enough, because of the fact that it is rear engine, rear wheel drive, again, funnily enough, just like the Samba bus, it does have a tendency to being a little bit slippery. Now the one that I'm using in the video is fully upgraded. It's a bit of a beast. It's running well over 30 horsepower, which is pretty extreme, I know, but if you drive it for a few laps, you can get it under control and really tame the beast. But in its stock form, you're looking at a whopping 16 horsepower and an even more impressive 22 pound-feet of torque, which is, I would say, thunderous actually. That's pretty intense. Now the weight of the car is only 520 kilos, so about half a ton metric, and the horsepower per ton is a frankly face-melting 31, which is insane. Again, it takes quite a while to learn to master the car. The kind of performance is, I guarantee, unlike anything you've ever driven before. You can forget Red Bulls, you can forget Tomahawks. It really does redefine speed. If, of course, the speed that you're referring to is the speed of watching your own facial hair grow quicker than the time it takes for the car to get to 60 miles per hour. Now, as far as cornering ability, it's actually pretty good. It is nimble, as I said, but the fact that it is rear engine, rear wheel drive makes it feel, in a funny kind of way, almost like a little Porsche or a little Volkswagen Karmann Ghia or a Beetle, but on a much more shrunken scale. So the front end is a little bit looser because you've got less weight there. But again, it doesn't take very long to get a handle on this thing. It's not the most useful thing in the world for racing, of course. I mean, who expected that it would? And it's not going to be anytime soon unless they significantly change the upgrade system in the game, which I have no reason to think that they will do that, at least not for this particular installment in the franchise. So for the moment, it's definitely a collector's piece. Thankfully, for those who do want to try the car, and it certainly does have its fans, for the fun factor in particular, it's only 21 grand. So that's pretty good for a collector's piece. It's certainly not a car that should be ridiculously expensive. in a similar way to some other classics which for instance are worth that kind of money, like your classic Ferraris and Jags and GT40s and Cobras. Of course it's not that level of car, although funnily enough in its own way 21 grand is pretty hefty for this car. That's only 9 grand less than the Evo 4, so when you put it in that perspective, maybe it's not so much of a bargain. So if you go into buying this car, as most of you guys probably have at this point, and if you haven't already, you're probably not planning to because it is so cheap, but if you haven't, for whatever reason, bought it, sure, give it a try. You can buy it with your spare change. You don't even need to upgrade it. It doesn't make a huge difference to the performance anyway. So if you fancy a bit of fun driving the automotive equivalent of a peanut, then sure, give it a try. And I personally actually really hope that they add the best rival that this car has ever had in the franchise from Gran Turismo 6 in its latest installment, and that is a car which I actually really like, the Subaru 360, which is an excellent rival for this car. I actually like that car a lot more than this one, but it's not quite as famous, not quite as iconic, at least in Europe, for instance, and America. But overall, sure, give it a try. It's a laugh, it's a bit of fun. For one make racing, you could certainly have a ton of fun with friends. But overall, that's it, of course, for this pick. Don't expect a tune set up for this anytime soon. I'm sorry to disappoint. I know there are plenty of people who wanted a drag tune for this car running 8-second quarter miles, but not necessarily soon. Unless, of course, you put it on Racing Super Softs, and then you might actually have a chance. But that's it for this pick, of course. I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.